So we're excited to have Janice as our opening plenary speaker on the topic of mindful leadership. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Janice Marturano.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. I am delighted to be here, and I want to thank all of you for taking this time to explore what it's like to train your mind. That's what mindful leadership training is about. And we've already heard from the chief about leadership and how important leadership is from each of you. Leadership is really, when you get down to its core, about influence. And every single one of us, every single day, for better or worse, influences, for better or worse. Sometimes, even with the very best intentions about how we want to be in the world, about what we are about, and what we see our roles are, things just come out of our mouth that we're not sure where that came from. Or the day slips away, we don't know what happened to it. And it is easy for us to not even realize that those things are happening. And that certainly is what happened for me. And I'd like to begin this morning by sharing my story with you of how did this person, who was a corporate strategist for more than 25 years, leave the world of being the deputy general counsel and corporate officer at a Fortune 200 company to found the Institute for Mindful Leadership, a nonprofit. So to answer that question, we're going to go all the way back to the turn of the century, and at my age, I'm really quick to add this century. And even before I start that, I'm going to invite you to do an experiment right now, if you choose, an experiment about your own mind, and that is take out your phone and turn it off. Don't put it on mute. Literally, it does have an off switch. Turn it off. And while I'm speaking for this next hour and inviting you to explore other ways that we're going to show you how to train your mind, notice how often your mind goes to wanting to look at that screen. And what does that tell you about how you go about your day? So, if you care to try this first experiment, turn it off. Just for an hour. I promise it'll turn on again in an hour. All right, so back in the turn of the century, I was what I think many of you might find yourself as well, which is a 21st century juggler. So in my case, in the air, the balls that I was juggling included being at that time a new corporate officer, married, 2 school-aged children, the daughter of aging parents, and the board president of a large nonprofit in the Twin Cities. Lots of balls in the air, really enjoying what I was doing. I felt like I had it all. Everything was going fine, and most days the balls stayed in the air. Sometimes it took a lot of fast footwork, but things seemed to be okay. Life was full. And then one day I got a phone call from our CEO who said, General Mills is going to buy Pillsbury. So those are 2 companies, both headquartered in the Twin Cities, about equal sized. And for all of you who have ever watched or been a part of any kind of acquisition, as soon as you announce an acquisition, every minute counts, because everything is in turmoil. Both companies are in turmoil, the clients are in turmoil, the communities of those companies is in turmoil. So it's really important to try and get it done quickly. This acquisition, we estimated, would take about 5 or 6 months. It was 2 big organizations. And my job was to lead the team that would get FTC compliance. Okay. So we began to work. We worked very long hours, and as it would turn out, we had someone on the other side who just didn't want this thing to happen no matter what. So he would give us piles of hundreds of pages of questions. And I remember one morning coming back from Washington, D.C., where I'd been with some of the experts they had asked us to bring in, and I was stopped on my way to my office by one of the officers from Pillsbury, And he asked me about how did it go in DC? And I said, well, our experts answered all their questions. I think they did great. We submitted pages and pages, volumes of information that they asked for. And I thought we were moving forward, but as we were walking out the door, they handed us another stack of questions. And he kind of nodded his head and he listened, and then he said, if you don't get this deal through, 10,000 Pillsbury employees are likely to lose their job. Now, I didn't really need more pressure or stress at that point. But to me, those 10,000 people were 10,000 families in my community in the Twin Cities. So that was a lot of extra medicine ball to be juggling. About a month after that conversation, we're still working at this 7 days a week now, flat out. My mom passed away. I was very close to her, and so this was a big shock for me, and yet I did what we do. We play hurt because there really wasn't any alternative. There were those 10,000 families. And 6 months later, we're still working at this thing. It's a whole year. We're still working at it. And my dad passed away. So this confluence of professional and personal tragedies coming together, and yet having no time to do anything except keep going. More and more depletion. Finally, 18 months after it began, we would get the deal through. At that point, I thought, okay, well now I'll bounce back. I'll have a little more space, actual time to grieve. Only, although I started juggling again, although I went back to my normal routines, I was profoundly aware that something had been lost during that 18-month period. So I was going through the motions and the balls were being juggled again, and yet something was lost. I would learn later in my work to develop the first mindful leadership curriculum from neuroscientists that I worked with that we actually can reach a place of such depletion that we don't bounce back. So here I was going through the motions, and a very good friend of mine who was a physician knew that I was going through the motions and that something wasn't still quite right. And he had a solution. He said, here's what you need to do, Janice. You need to go to a spa for a week. You need to eat good food and sleep, and then you'll be great. And at that point in my life, remember, school-age kids, married, I'd never been to a spa. Who had time for spa? Now, don't worry, because I've been to lots of spas since then. But at that time, the other thing in my mind, and imagine this, you have families, imagine going home after that 18-month stretch of time, excuse me, when I had to send my family away on vacation twice without me because I couldn't get away. Imagine me now going home and saying, Mom's going on vacation without you for a week, right? Not happening, not going to a spa. But he was insistent, this friend, and he kept sending me links. And one morning, one morning he sent me a link to a Zagat survey of the best spas in the country. And at the top of the list was this place in Arizona. And I was so very tired that morning, because all of this was affecting my ability to really sleep well, that I opened the link, and it opened to these beautiful pictures, Sonoma Mountains. You felt better looking at the pictures. It was just amazing, right? But still, I'm not going to a spa. But then on the side of that web page for this spa, I saw these special programs, and there was one called The Power of Mindfulness, an intensive retreat for executives. And I thought, well, maybe if it's intensive, it's okay to go to a spa. So, after talking with my wonderful husband and my children, I decided to learn more about what this mindfulness stuff was, because back then, in the business world, mindfulness didn't exist. Who knew what that was? And, I grew up in New Jersey, went to NYU. I don't hug trees, I don't burn incense, I don't wear robes, right? So what is this stuff? So I looked and I said, well, it's being taught by some guy named John Kabat-Zinn. Oh, okay, he's an MIT microbiologist. Oh, I feel better now. Okay, this could be all right. And ultimately I would go. For 6 days, 13 of us in the desert of Arizona, we would start at 6 in the morning and end at 9 at night. And to this day, it was among the top 10 hardest things I've ever done in my life. I was so accustomed to going 150 miles an hour that when I began to stop and actually use the capacities of my mind to be fully present, it was a lot like hitting a brick wall. Now, I promise not to do that to you today. We'll have just a few tastes of things. But that's how it began, my exposure to this training of the mind. When I came back to General Mills, I started doing, again, my normal work as a corporate officer, and I began to see very quickly how this intersection of leadership development and training of the mind began to produce a different way of not only leading but living for me. And so, let's take a look at mindful leadership and how you might get to know it a little bit yourself. Let's start with purpose. Purpose of mindful leadership. Let me just show a few of these. So just show of hands, better decision making, more innovation, more ethical leadership. Any of those three resonate with you for why you might want to learn mindful leadership to make better decisions, to be more innovative, to have more ethical leadership? Show of hands? Anybody? Okay. How about this? Stress management, greater resilience, more productivity. How about that one? Okay. Can it possibly be that it all begins with training your mind to be present? So let's start with a definition. What's mindfulness? Actually, let's start with what it's not, because today it is an overused term. Everybody wants to teach mindfulness. Everybody wants to tell you how to do mindfulness. Many times it's not mindfulness. I actually saw an advertisement for mindful broccoli. Not quite sure what that is. So what it's not a religion. It's not New Age. This third one surprises people. It's not about achieving relaxation. Although, oftentimes when we are practicing mindful leadership training, you might feel yourself relax. But that's more about actually bringing your mind and body and heart into this moment, rather than the typical time traveling, which our mind is typically always planning, always ruminating. And it's not a way to eliminate stress, okay? Stress isn't the bad thing. It's how we meet what's in our lives. So another way of thinking about mindful leadership is it's expanding your repertoire of how you meet the moments of your life, okay? So here's what it is. Really simple definition. Non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness. Sounds good, right? Non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness. What's the hardest part of that? Non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness. Yeah, non-judgmental. Moment-to-moment awareness isn't a picnic either, but non-judgmental is really hard. And as I travel the world and teach mindful leadership to people, they'll say to me, wait a minute, they're paying me to make judgments. That's what I do. Leaders make judgments. They're paying me. If this is non-judgmental, how could it be mindful leadership if mindfulness part of it is non-judgmental? So here's a question, not for you to answer now, but to consider. Are you being paid to judge, or are you being paid to discern? In your role as a leader, are you being paid to judge, or are you being paid to discern, and what's the difference? Oftentimes, and I'll leave that for you to ponder for yourself, but oftentimes, when we judge, we narrow. When we discern, we open. What is more likely to result in the better choice? So, non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness. Sounds good. And maybe your intention is to be mindful right now and every day. But this little depiction of this brain here is kind of what our life is like, right? All those balls in the air, everything that's going on, our ability to actually be aware of here, this moment fully, is not an easy thing to do. particularly when we're constantly attached. We're constantly connected in not a good way, not connected to ourselves and others and the community, but we're connected to technology. And technology is wonderful, does a lot of good things for us. But it's all about that 24/7, right? Am I constantly connected? Have I now become so addicted to it? So how are you doing with your experiment, by the way? How often has your mind felt, or maybe your hand reached for that phone, right? If that's happening in this hour, you can bet it's happening all day long. All right, so this is our mindfulness definition. Non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness. And it may seem like, well, I've got this knocked. I think I am non-judgmental, and I'm kind of aware all the time. So let's just take a couple of quick examples. How many people use conference calls in the course of their day? Conference calls? Great. All right, so here's the scenario. You've got a conference call on your agenda. You log into it, you're listening, it's set there. You're interested in the topic, you're sitting there listening. You decide that I'll just clear some spam mail while I'm listening. I'm still listening, just gonna clear some of that junk. And then you hear your name on the call. You don't have a clue what they were said. Well, what happened? You were sitting right there. Not fully aware of the moment. And we'll get to, in a minute, this idea of multitasking. Here's another one. You're driving, you cannot see the driver ahead of you, you just see the car. Can't see inside the car. Can you tell if that person is on the phone? Yes. How? Because they're driving terribly. They're driving erratically. Again, we can't multitask. All right. The best way to get a sense of how your mind is doing and what it would be like for you to train your mind to be in this moment, fully in this moment, for when you have to make those choices that are going to influence, you want all your marbles in the moment, not partial. So to do that, we have to train our mind to be present. And we have to notice when it goes somewhere other than where we want it to be and redirect it. And that redirection is actually the meditation. And I'm going to invite you to try it right now. If you would put everything down that's in your hands, put your feet flat on the floor. I'm going to guide a little mindfulness training right now. So you have a chance to see what would it be like to train my mind. You perhaps understand what it's like to train your body, right? We've known now for a while that our body has innate capacities to become more resilient and stronger. Well, our mind also has innate capacities that can be cultivated. And we're going to do that right now in one way. So if you're comfortable with it, if you could allow your eyes to close, and if you'd rather, you can just have a downward gaze. So beginning by bringing your attention, gathering it, and bringing your attention to the area of your body where you feel your breath. So where you feel your breath. I'm not inviting you to think about your breath, but actually feel the breath, whether it's at your nostril or in your throat, perhaps at your chest or in your belly. Find that place where you're feeling the sensations of your breath most strongly. And then aim and sustain your attention on the feelings of the entire in-breath and the entire out-breath. So if you're attending to your chest, you're feeling the stretch of the rib as the breath enters your body. And you're feeling the release as the breath leaves your body. Or if it's deep in your belly, feeling the abdominal muscles stretching with the in-breath. And then feeling them soften with the out-breath. attending to just this breath sensation, just as it is. Nothing to change about your breath, nothing to control. This isn't about deep breathing, just allowing your breath to be in its normal state, feeling these sensations in your body. And at some point when you notice that your mind has drifted away or been pulled away, noting what pulled it away, and then returning to the breath sensations, just picking up those sensations on the in-breath or the out-breath, and once again, sustaining attention, feeling your breath. No need for criticizing, why did my mind wander? Just bringing it back, gently and firmly bringing it back. Redirecting your attention back to the breath. Attending to the breath. And as you're ready, opening your eyes. So, show of hands, I kept my attention on my breath sensations the entire time. They never moved. Good, normal brains, very good. But as you probably noted, even in that short period of time, it may not have been so easy to stay focused on the breath sensations. And when our mind goes somewhere else, and as soon as we notice it, that's the moment of awareness. That's the moment of being mindful. That's when we redirect our attention back to where you chose it to be, which was on your breath. That redirection is how we begin to build our muscle of focus, of paying attention. So, not so easy, but there is really good news. We have a choice. We don't have to allow our minds to just flit around. We can train. And this little drawing came from an artist, an Italian artist who was at the World Economic Forum, who listened to my teaching a workshop there. And she, on these boards behind me that were floor to ceiling and the entire back, it was quite remarkable. She listened and turned into drawing the things I was saying. So I particularly love this one, taking our brain out for a walk, do a little training of the brain. All right, so here's our mindful leader definition. This is the definition, a very precise definition, as you'll see, and we'll take it apart a little bit. Mindful leader embodies leadership presence. Leadership presence is felt when you are fully present, whether it's in a room of hundreds or one-on-one. When you are present fully, it is felt. And the opposite is true. When you are not present, it is felt. You know this, right? You went to speak with someone, you had something important to tell them, they looked right at you, they did the head nod, the whole thing, you walked out the door, and at the threshold, you said, he, she, didn't hear a word I said. How do you know? You're right, by the way. How do you know? Because leadership presence is felt. It's true for us as well. When we're not fully here and engaged in the conversation, it's felt. That's true for our family, our friends, our colleagues, and the people we serve. So how do we do this? How do we make ourselves better at presence, about leadership presence? We do it in a very specific way. We cultivate these four, what I call fundamentals of excellence: focus, clarity, creativity, and compassion. And in the mindful leader definition, we never forget in the service of others. So we never do this training for greed or for ourselves alone. We do this with a recognition that we're all in this together. Okay? Let's take this apart a little bit more. Focus. Focus. This gets back to that multitasking, so I promised you I'd say more about that. The reality is we are not able to multitask. Multitask is something that is used, that computers can do. Because they have multiple processors, they are able to multitask. We took that term into our lives as human beings, but the problem is we can't do it. I used to write job descriptions, must be able to multitask, right? Can't do it. So what happens when we think we're multitasking? Here's what your brain is doing. It's doing this. It's flitting. It's flitting back and forth, this thing to this thing, right? Well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is when you move from here to here, you can't pick it up where you left off. So you have to take a couple steps back and ramp into it. If it's anything of any kind of complexity, you can't pick it up where you left off. And when they study this, they found 30% productivity loss just from multitasking. So if you want 30% more time in your day, stop multitasking. Okay? And, of course, connections are lost. That's that presence. That's that ability to be here. When we notice our mind wanders when we're speaking with someone, we can see it and bring it back. All right, so that's focus. That's the first part that we have to cultivate. And you just had a little tiniest taste of it just now. As you build that muscle to notice more and more frequently and more quickly when my mind is somewhere other than where I want it to be, and I learn how to redirect it, that's how we increase our focus. Okay? Clarity. Cultivating our ability to develop greater clarity applies not only to seeing clearly the events and environments around us, but also to seeing ourselves more clearly. So in our practice and our training of mindful leadership, we begin to see the storytelling in our mind. Sometimes we can write full-length feature films about something or someone. We start to see those thoughts when they arise, where we decide that person is always going to do this. Or, well, I don't know why I'm going to that meeting because I know exactly how it's going to turn out. And if you go into something like that and you see that thought, you can hold that thought with lightness. You may or may not be right. What comes up in your mind may or may not be true. This is also how we get at things like unconscious bias. So in mindful leadership training, the full trainings, we're also getting at this clarity. How do I see what's here today? Not what was here last week or last year or not what I expected to be here, but what's actually here? What's being said? What do I hear? Not what do I want to hear, but what do I actually hear? Okay, this is the clarity piece. Creativity. What we know from neuroscience is that our brains need spaciousness for creativity and innovation. Well, not easy when our minds are constantly on a to-do loop, right? There's no space. But I bet you've all had this experience, or most of you have. Say you're working on something really difficult in your life, in your work life, something with your family. You set aside time to think about it. Maybe you talk to a lot of people about it. You do research, not getting to the answer. Go to sleep one night. Next morning, you're in the shower. Aha, there's the answer. And it was simple. It just pops in your mind in the shower. What happened? It's not the magic of shower water, right? It's because your mind hasn't yet clicked into that loop. And so there was just that space. And in our training of mindful leadership, as we train our mind's innate capacities, we can train ourselves to have more of that spaciousness. Last but not least, compassion. As we use compassion at the Institute in our curriculum, compassion does not mean sympathy or empathy. Compassion means deep understanding. Because when we allow ourselves the time and effort it takes to deeply understand, we often notice and feel, physically feel, a pull toward an act of kindness. Most of the leaders that I run into, the very best leaders that I have run into over the last 12 years that I've been teaching this now, are people with bright minds and great hearts. And if they are anywhere on their to-do list, they're all the way at the bottom. So compassion, much like many of the other best of human emotions, requires us to learn about self-compassion to enable us to be more compassionate to others. And so taking a look at what's here for you in the world of being self-compassionate and that deep understanding, it can be something as simple and also as common as, I'm always tired. I wake up tired. I go to sleep tired. I feel tired all day. I got to pump the caffeine. And maybe if we sit with that for a few moments and just ask ourselves, what's called for now? For me, what's called for now? Because I can't possibly influence for better to the best of my ability if I'm always tired. Maybe the pull toward an act of kindness is something as simple as, I'm going to bed a half an hour early, or I'm going to say no to this next project. All right, so, okay. Let's just pull these things together. We talked about influence, and to be influential, you need to be connected to yourself, others, and the big picture. And you need to be skillful at change. So if you think about this, in order for me to connect well, I need to be focused, clear, creative, and compassionate. And in order for me to be skillful, I need to be focused, clear, creative, and compassionate. So this is how these things begin to fit together. So how do we train in this? The first piece, there's 3 parts to our curriculum. The first piece you've already had, a taste of meditation. The second one is leadership reflection. This is the innate capacity of your mind to engage in reflection. We're very well schooled in analytical training, not so much in how do I use my mind's capacity for reflection. And the third one is purposeful pause. At 11 o'clock in the workshop, we're going to take time to do this leadership reflection. So if you're joining me there, we're going to do it. It takes too much time to do right now, but I wanted you to know about it. And in the books, you'll have an ability to do it on your own. But I do want to spend time right now on purposeful pauses. I realized as a senior exec, just as all of you realize, that if something's not very approachable and easy for me to do, it's going to be tough, right? Just like an exercise regime, it's hard to get into, it's hard to stick with it. So my objective in teaching this training and in putting this curriculum together was to make it accessible. And purposeful pauses are a way for you to train all day long in tiny little bits without putting any extra time on your calendar. Sound good? All right, here's a purposeful pause. And we're going to pay attention mostly to the intentional. Let's take that one. So, intentional purposeful pauses are trainings that you're going to do starting today that train your mind while you're doing something that you do all the time. So, here's some examples. Let's take brushing your teeth. Everyone's going to brush your teeth later in the day. We're going to turn brushing your teeth into a training for your mind by doing exactly what we did in that meditation, except we're going to be brushing our teeth. So I'm going to brush my teeth and I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to bring an intention to be present to this brushing of my teeth. I'm going to feel the bristles, taste the toothpaste, hear the water, feel the air on my face, whatever is there for me to notice. And every time my mind goes off to my 10 o'clock meeting or calling my kid about their homework or whatever it is, I'm going to notice that it went somewhere else and I'm going to redirect. Remember, redirect is the practice. I'm going to redirect, bring it back. So if it takes you 2 minutes to brush your teeth, you're going to have a 2-minute training of your mind, of your brain. You're going to use those 2 minutes. It can be anything you do routinely can be a practice. All right? Driving to work, just drive. Don't be on the phone. Certainly don't be texting. Just drive. Pay attention to what's here as you drive. Your hands on the steering wheel, the sounds of the other cars, whatever's here for you to notice. When I give that assignment to groups that I'm working with, inviting them to just drive, I hear things like, my car really needs to go to the shop. Or, I didn't notice that my neighbor's house painted yellow. When did she do that? And turns out it was 3 years ago. All kinds of things begin to show up when we pay attention to the moments in our lives. And every time we redirect, we're strengthening our ability to pay attention. Every time we notice where our mind was pulled to, it's helping us with clarity. What is worrying me? What is that rumination? I once had someone describe for me a situation where they were in a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, and a colleague said some things that they felt undermined their team. So they were understandably upset by this. They were angry about it. That happened at 10 in the morning. At night, they're at dinner, and he later told me that I kept thinking about it. I kept rerunning it in my head. I should have said this. Why did they say that? That's really going to hurt my team. The whole full-length feature film at dinner. So I wasn't there at dinner. I was physically there, but not mentally there. And that was the kind of insight for him, was the suffering that was created in that day was not so much about that 10 o'clock call and the 15 minutes where that event happened, but it was the whole day and into the evening where it was just consuming him. And he was just ruminating about this. And this practice, this training, noticing these thoughts and letting them be, is another part of this training. So letting them be, bring your attention back. In that instance, as he would learn to train his mind, he would be able to say, not now, to those ruminations, and be here for his child or be here for his partner. Okay. So anything that you do routinely is a purposeful pause, is a training for your mind. And I'm going to invite you to think about 3 things that you can do when you return to work that you do routinely. Walk from your car to your office, maybe eat lunch. Don't read the computer screen. If you're going to take only 10 minutes for lunch, have lunch. Taste it. Nourish your body. It's an act of self-compassion. Actually take care. It can be walking down the hallway. I had a very difficult colleague. I mean, somebody who really pressed my buttons. And in my career, there were really very few. I could count on one hand the number of people who I had a hard time relating to. I really love people. But this person, and it was a client, had to work with this client. And maybe you have somebody in your life like that. I'm sure no one at work, but I had someone. And it got to a point one day where her name popped up in my caller ID, and I actually felt my chest tighten. And I thought, okay, this is creating chest pains. That's how quickly the mind and body are connected, right? Just seeing her name gave me a tightness. And normally what happens when I had to walk to the client's office for a meeting with her is the whole walk, I'm doing the full-length feature film, right? This is going to be terrible. She's so obnoxious. Why is this so difficult? What a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. By the time I arrive, how am I? Tight, closed, nothing good's going to happen, right? Okay. This time I decided, all right, let me use my practice. And so I turned that walk to her office into a practice where with each step, I was recognizing that there are common parts of our humanity that we all have. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel happy. We want to feel healthy, right? These are common things. So what I did instead was I turned that walk into a practice, and with each step, I offered something like that to her. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be healthy. Whatever it was, each step, right? May you be safe. Each step. And what really surprised me, because it was just an experiment, I had no idea what was going to happen, is I arrived at the doorway open. I had a feeling of openness. We had our meeting. It was over. I was walking out. And she called me back and she said, Janice, that was a really great meeting. She didn't have any idea what happened, right? It was a great meeting from my perspective as well. Did we become best friends? No. But there was a connection formed that was much more skillful than, and something as simple as that. And every time on my walk, by the way, when those old thoughts kept coming back, like, she's, whatever, not now. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. Okay? So sometimes our practice is very practical and things like that and very simple for us to do. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, had this quote that, although he doesn't call it purposeful pauses, to me that's what he's describing. Between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So you saw that these intentionals are training the other kind of purposeful pauses in the moment. So in the moment, you're sitting in the meeting and you're noticing your heart starting to race, or you're noticing you're tightening. That's an in-the-moment purposeful pause opportunity where you can bring your attention to your breath, because you don't have to close your eyes and meditate to feel your breath. Looking at me right now, can you feel your breath? And if that's hard for you, can you feel the soles of your feet on the floor? Either of those things brings you into the present moment, which is what we're trying to do. To be your best influential self, you need to be present. Why does feeling your breath or feeling your feet on the floor bring you into the present? Because the only place you can feel this breath is in this moment. You can't feel the next one, and you can't feel the last one. As soon as I gather my attention and bring it to anything in my body, feet on the floor, breath, as soon as I bring it to a feeling in my body, I'm bringing myself to the present. So that's the space that we want to operate from. That's the place that we want to ask ourselves that question when we're feeling tight, when our mind is starting to race, when the emotions are rising. What we want to do is use our brains and capacity to be present. Use our body to help us get there. Feel the sensations. Feel your feet on the floor and ask yourself the question, what's called for now? Not what's on the tip of my tongue necessarily. What's called for now? That's how we begin to move into a place of leadership excellence. Okay, just a minute about the Institute. We do mindful leadership training for organizations and for teams. We do live, online, and in-person retreats. And you all have a copy of Finding the Space to Lead. I'm going to invite you to take your copy out if you have it with you. And I'm going to show you how you can use it to begin some mindful leadership training on your own to get yourself started. So if you have your book, if you open to the back, this was a book that I wrote not as a book about mindful leadership, but a how-to book. So if you look at Appendix 2 on page 186. So you'll see there a step-by-step, remember those 3 parts of mindful leadership curriculum: meditation, purposeful pause, and reflections. So for the very first week, the recommendation is that you find 2 10-minute times in your day. And if that sounds like, oh, where am I going to find 2 10-minute times? Ask yourself, what do you do in your day that is more valuable than training your mind? So 2 10-minute meditations per day, and in the first week, it's breath and sound meditations. 3 purposeful pauses. If you turn back 1 page to page 184, you'll see that very first basic mindfulness meditation instructions. Breath and sound. See the little play button? Anything on this page that has a play button means that if you go to the book's website, these are free downloadable meditations. So I'm taking all your excuses away. They're free. They're on the website. You got the book, okay? 10 minutes twice a day, or 1 20-minute session if that works better for you. So that's the meditation part, right? 3 purposeful pauses. You're going to brush your teeth. Make that 2 of the 3, morning and the evening. Pick 1 more. Something else you do, ideally somewhere during the day. Walk down the hallway, this particular hallway. I had a hallway outside my office, and I used to use it as my purposeful pause hallway because I had to walk it many times during the course of the day to go to meetings, clients' offices. And sometimes because I was having a day. And I'd use it, it was between my office and the place where the coffee and tea was. I'm a big lover of tea. And I had a wonderful colleague who was my assistant, and her name was Susan. And she helped in many ways get mindful leadership off the ground in those early days, in the beginning when I was just teaching it at General Mills. And so she knew about my hallway. And I would find out later, tell people, when I was having a bad day, she always knew it because she would tell them, Janice is off for tea. This is the 6th time this morning she's walking down that hallway again. So that was her way of knowing that I needed lots of purposeful pauses in a particular day. All right, so 3 purposeful pauses, and you're going to use that meditation for the first week. And obviously, as you could see, it's a 7-week and beyond, and it is a curriculum that builds. So although you can read the chapters in any order, if there's a particular chapter that resonates with you, you don't have to read the book in order. The practices are meant to be in order. They get a little more challenging as you go on. So you really want to start with the basic instructions in breath and sound. Okay. Now, how are we doing with that experiment you had with your... Yeah, this is just, this has really been shockingly surprising to me. The book has been translated in languages all around the world, and I'm always so humbled and grateful for that. You can take your phone out again if you would like, and this is another support for you that is completely free. If you join the Institute's mailing list, and you can do it by just texting these letters, you will get every month, just once a month, my instructors and I write articles that help. We send out some new practices. We'll tell you about some upcoming trainings, whatever's going on, and it's only once a month. We don't abuse the privilege, but we do see this as part of our second part of our mission. The first part is to offer up what we consider to be gold standard in mindful leadership trainings, workshops, online, live retreats. The second part is to be there for the journey. And so it is a part of our commitment and our mission to be there for the journey, to support all of you who choose to undertake this training. Okay, maybe I'm going to leave it there and ask if there are questions before I give us another chance to do a little practice. We have some mics here, so if there are any questions. No? Oh, in the back? Oh, and yeah.
Oh, it's right here. Here you go. Yeah. So my first? Yeah. So I wanted to see if you could give us some feedback or thoughts on, I hear the term executive presence a lot, and mindfulness, just the impact there. Is there any correlation, or, just 2 separate leadership concepts?
I think leadership presence for me is about being in the moment. So bringing yourself into this moment. And there's a lot that goes into it. So it's not enough to say, today I will be mindful, or today I will exhibit leadership presence. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. And when we live in a society of continuous partial attention, so when we are in that place where we really never attend to anything fully, this training has become not a nice to have, but a must have, because it's a counterbalance to what's going on. So in order to exhibit executive presence, as you're referring to it, you need to actually be present. And being present requires us to train these innate capacities of our mind. So this is not a tool, right? Mindful leadership training is not some tool out there. It is recognizing that, for example, my mind has the capacity to aim and sustain attention. However, when I spend my whole day doing this, flitting or being so connected that I'm constantly feeling a pull to look at the phone, look at the phone, look at the phone, then that's a conditioning that is weakening my mind's innate capacity to pay attention. And I'll share with you a quick story, and then I know we have another question. PBS did a show, and if you're interested in this, take a look at it. It's called Distracted. And they went to MIT grad students, right? Arguably some of the best and brightest young people in our nation. And they had them fill out a form about how much of their day do they multitask. And they did these little interviews with the grad students. And they rated their day. They tracked their day of how much of their day they were multitasking. And they had some interviews where people, the grad students, would say things like, the professors don't get it. We grew up multitasking. We know how to do this. We were 2 and we were multitasking. So our brains know how to do this. They don't get it. They don't, they make us turn our laptops off, but they don't get it. We can do it. And then they gave these same grad students complex tests in mathematics. So difficult tests, but not beyond what an MIT grad student is capable of. And what they found was a direct correlation. The more someone rated their multitasking, so the more they multitasked during the day, the worse their score was. Well, why? What happened there? So what happened is what we were talking about earlier. When your mind is so conditioned to do this, and now you need it to focus because complex mathematical problems require you to stay attentive and stay focused step to step to step, they would lose their focus and then have to back up and start in again and back up and start in again. So they didn't get as much done as people who didn't multitask as much and were able to stay focused. So these are some pretty interesting and somewhat scary pieces that tell us in order for us to inhabit executive presence, in order for us to influence more often for better, less often for worse, we need to do some training. We need to get that focus. We need to get that clarity, particularly in the society today where people tend to speak in extremes and emotional extremes. That how do I begin to soften my own storytelling so I can hear more clearly what somebody else is saying? There's another question here. Yeah.
You answered it.
I answered it. Okay. Someone else? In the back, over?
Yep. Peter, here. Peter.
I think this is about fear. It's about when you're in the moment and what seems to be a very valuable insight comes into your mind. Gee, I have to thank so-and-so for such and such, or don't forget to take that today because that's critically important. And there's a little bit of a fear of if you're in the moment all the time, do you lose those insightful connections?
Yeah. You're talking about if you're in your practice and that thought comes up?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So great question. Thank you. So what I would invite you to do is experiment with, do you really forget? Because what happens is that sort of storytelling that, well, if I don't stop my practice right now and at least write it down, then I'll forget. And it's been my experience that oftentimes, most times, that's a story that we tell ourselves, and that when it's really important, we'll remember it. And what you can do at that time is when you're saying not now, you're also noting it. So here comes, I'm practicing with my breath. Here comes that, oh, I forgot to thank Bob. Okay, not now for that, but in the act of saying not now, you've actually reinforced it, so you'll remember it. You can come back to practice. Otherwise, our mind doesn't really like this training sometimes, and so it'll keep pulling us out, and we'll keep interrupting our practice. And the reason that there's 10 minutes and then ultimately 20 minutes of practice is because the longer we practice it, the stronger we get at that focus. Yes?
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I've been a practitioner of meditation for a long time. And I've been trying to get my boss to understand the importance of mindfulness training and to allow me to work with my staff around that. And the answer is not at work. So any advice, because I've tried the research, I've tried providing articles, and I'm not getting through. And I understand the importance of it. So any advice you might give me and others in the room, much appreciated.
Sure, thank you for the question. What we teach is not mindfulness, we teach mindful leadership. So as part of our curriculum, we explore leadership ethics, we explore unconscious bias, we explore many of the leadership challenges today involved with working with a world that's getting increasingly small. So clarity, how do I begin to see my own assumptions about things? I go into a room and I'm assuming, I set a strategy and I bring in all kinds of assumptions. So our work is very focused on leadership development, and when people bring us in to work with them, they're talking about developing leadership in their professionals at work, and I think that helps. So I can just tell you how we do it, but our curriculum is very much as much about leadership as it is about meditation. In fact, meditation is just a piece of it, as you saw. So I don't know if that helps you, but that is a distinction that has helped us bring this curriculum to organizations. They see it as leadership training. Yes, someone else? Okay, did we miss anyone? No? Stand up if we're missing you. That's hard to see. Okay. All right, so one last practice before we wrap up. So just if you would, if you care to, just allow your eyes to close one more time. Feet flat on the floor, please. And allowing your eyes to close if that works for you, or a soft downward gaze. Once more, as you take your seat to train your mind, it's an act of courage to stop, to be in this moment by gathering your attention, then feeling the sensations of your breath, just as they are. There's nothing to change, nothing to control. Attending to the entire in-breath, the sensations of the entire in-breath. Perhaps noticing that pause between an in-breath and an out-breath. Feeling the entire out-breath. And again, feeling the pause before the next breath begins. Open and curious about what's here for you to notice about these sensations. Is my breath deep in my belly right now or shallow? Am I noticing that my breath is rhythmic or perhaps sporadic? Nothing to change about the breath. Just open and curious about what's here in this moment. Noticing if my mind wanders, and noticing what pulled it away, letting it be for now, and redirecting your attention back to your breath. Breathing in, knowing you are breathing in. And breathing out, knowing you are breathing out. resting in your awareness of this breath. And as you're ready, opening your eyes. I want to thank you for your attention and your participation. It's been a real honor, and I hope to see some of you at 11.